Oh, does it sound far away?
You're not on the other side of the room, are you?
I don't think so.
Hey, listen, I had a news report that really tied in a long thing all about, the California governor going down to El Salvador.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking about part of that in your report. That,
Yeah.
And it was talking about remittances because the United States does provide millions in aid to Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and in return, these countries fail to accept deportees and continue to run like a narco state.
Yeah.
So, Kimberly, why does the U.S. allow these migrants to skip the line and flee into America scot-free?
Well, right now, I think what you're seeing is, they've decided that the easiest way to get to this country now is to rush the border, in essence, by just overwhelming the personnel that's on the border. So when you look at people who do this day in and day out, they're seeing like double, triple, quadruple the numbers that they're used to seeing. And so if you're trying to get into the country illegally, you might as well jump in because it's going to be a lot easier to jump in front of that line. Because primarily, in Yuma, for instance, over the weekend, they said they're releasing all of these people that they're detaining that they don't see, serious criminal charges in their backgrounds, but we don't know who they are exactly. But in any event, they're doing this because they said that we simply have no more room. We can't care for these people anymore, and they're releasing them to the communities. And now you've got communities along the southern border that are overwhelmed with medical treatment, with education needs, with translators that they don't have, and you're seeing a real crisis at the border right now. So I mean, technically, this is a real crisis at this point.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in again here this thing about this fence that they built in Hungary, and let me see here the part that really ties into what you just said. Yeah, illegals who are caught and arrested are dropped off on the Siberian side of the fence. Now then, they don't get a chance to apply for asylum unless they do it at a transit zone, and while they are held in housing containers and while their cases get processed. Isn't it amazing that once again the Democrats would show their colors if you just said, all right, from now on, every time anybody wants to come across the border, they have to do it at the border zone or some designated area, and then we'll process and see what's going on. But it's always like, no, once you set your foot in there, boy, that means I'm safe. Yeah. The umpire has to call me safe.
Well, yeah, and I think that when you look at the situation and how it's just like grown, it's really an avalanche at this point of people coming across the border. This is exactly what the Democrats feel like. However, when you look down the road, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, we're going to see all kinds of different problems in this country as a result of it. We're basically allowing people that have no education whatsoever, have no means whatsoever, to come into this country and take advantage of a country that provides a substantial social network of welfare benefits and food and free education and free health care. And right now the Democrats are screaming, we need to fix health care. Well, what do they think all of these people doing here are going, what's the burden on the health system going to be once these people are all allowed in the country and effectively released, because we can't hold them in one place for more than a few days. So, I mean, it's going to create more problems. And I just, when you look at the totality, I guess, of the situation, you're seeing that there's going to be some big issues coming down the road in 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and of course we keep, what is the word? I guess it's like a bullhorn, coming from the left. Come on in,
Yeah.
Boy, everything's wonderful here, and don't worry about it. And and Monica Showalter, Showalter, talked about Newsom going to El Salvador.
Oh, yeah.
When you get it, you'll have to Google that and check it out.
I've been reading it.
I'm sorry I didn't hear you. Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. How much do they take from the U.S. economy and give their homes?
Yeah, that's there's some really big numbers here. When you look at Mexico, You think that Mexico is most likely the largest recipient of these remittances, money coming back from the United States down to their economy, and they're getting approximately $9 billion every year in remittances into their economy. And that's actually, something, when you look at the scale of the economy, it's actually on their list of, things that, they couldn't live without because their economy would collapse, are these remittances. But I think what's shocking is when I went online to go look up the actual numbers from the Federal Reserve, Guatemala, tiny little country, also getting about $9 billion in remittances. I mean, that's staggering. Right there, we're seeing $18 billion. And then with Honduras and El Salvador, we're looking at roughly $20 to $21 billion every year leaving the U.S. economy and going back to those countries. While the people are working here and they are using the roads, they're using the bridges, they're using the schools, they're using the healthcare. And, the majority of the time, they're not paying for that because they're not coming here and, working as architects or doctors or whatnot. So, I mean, they're actually takers of the economy here, but they're being allowed to send this money back. And it's interesting when you look at other countries like the Philippines, they're actually allowing the remittances to go out of their country, but they're actually taking a percent of that remittance so it can actually cover some of the bills that these people are racking up in their country. And I know that the Trump administration's tried to do this for a long time now, and it seems that, in essence, with him over the weekend saying he was cutting off aid to these countries, that is kind of a backing into, we're going to tax your remittances, because basically he's going to pull that money out and it's going to be used, in essence, to take care of these people at the border. So if the people in the countries of Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico, if they don't want that money taken, then they might want to start up, protecting their own borders and enforcing the laws in their countries.
Well, and when you look at, see, I added those up, just the rough figures, okay, 9 billion, 9 billion, 21 billion.
Yeah.
Out of those four countries, that's $60 billion roughly that's going out of the United States, $60 billion to them. And then you look at Mexico, and it's a very important thing that they get double voting privileges. If you're an American citizen and you're from Mexico, you can still vote in Mexico, and they love it that way for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Another thing is interesting is these people that are being smuggled across the border, okay? I understand, according to the world famous Kimberly Dvorak, that they're paying about $8,000 per person.
Yeah.
How do they pay that money? I mean, how can you take up a collection if it's per person, for example? You have two children. Yeah, go ahead.
So they're looking like if it's, just say it's just one person, $8,000. So again, now I went back onto the Federal Reserve Consumer Finances report to find out what the average American savings account looks like in this country. Now, if you're under the age of 35, your savings account has approximately $1,500 in it. If you're 35 to 44, you have $5,000 in your savings account. If you are 45 to 55, you have $6,500 in your account. Can you see where we're going with these numbers? People in this country don't even have that kind of money sitting in their savings accounts, yet people from other countries are able to scrap up enough money to pay illegal smugglers to have themselves trafficked into this country. And the numbers get worse when we look at this for the demographics of race. So like whites and non-Hispanics, their average savings account is $7,000, still not that $8,000 number. Black and African-American households have $1,000 in savings, and Hispanics have $1,500.
Is there an age on that?
Yeah, no, that's just by the first were by ages, and then the other were by demographics, by their by race. But you look at those numbers. Where are these people? You have to wonder, where are they getting the money? And if they had that kind of money in their countries, the cost of living in Honduras is vastly different than living in the United States. So that $8,000 to their their economy would surely help the bottom line. But they're taking that money, they're paying it to illegal coyotes or, human traffickers, and they're getting themselves up to this country collecting even more benefits when American citizens, American citizens don't have that kind of money sitting in their account. They run paycheck to paycheck, but by and large here. And so when you look at it that way, it's terrible to see this.
I'm looking at that one, ages 45 to 55. That would be for an average white American, $6,500. And I'm roughly guessing now. I think in order to get close to 100,000, I'm going to have to be 120, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
But it just.
Yeah.
Oh, it just said.
Maybe Congress could end all of this by tomorrow, right? How do that?
They could. Congress could absolutely end it. We already have laws on the books. We've heard the president say it. We've heard now nameless people on TV say it all the time. We hear talk radio. We talk about it all the time. Congress just needs to start enforcing the law. There is no law that says we must take every single person who arrives at our doorstep. Just pure and simple. We don't have to take them. And when you go back in and you look at what the presidential powers say, they say that, of course, the president's the executive branch and he enforces the laws that are on the books. But if Congress isn't doing anything to push the state and local principalities to make sure they're enforcing these laws, the president has an absolute right as the commander in chief to enforce those laws and ensure that our borders are safe. And in a time when we are at several wars across the globe, much of them not necessary for us, but be that as it may, we are out there creating enemies by the day for helping give democracy to countries that don't want democracy. And they've learned that it's quite easy, actually, to fly over to Mexico or Central America, and you can come up with the caravans and you can get into this country. So it's not just simply that, we're taking migrants into this country. We don't know who all these people are. And presumably from people that I've talked with, there are several terrorists from organizations that are enemies of the United States that are passing themselves off as migrants and crossing that border. That's national security. And that's a disaster waiting to happen. And that's what you're seeing and what you saw over the weekend with CBP and Border Patrol just sounding the alarm, saying we cannot do this. We can't keep up. We just simply don't have the money or the manpower. And that's what they figured out. That's the easiest way. Okay, great. We're going to rush the border. It would be like rushing a store and trying to take everything out of the store. Police could arrest a few people, but they're not going to get everybody. And that's what they're doing at the border.
Yeah. But probably, I think it might have been number 3 whenever they were talking about they'd actually found some terrorists connected, ISIS connected people that had snuck in with the thing. And, it only takes one.
Yeah.
It only takes one. Back to this thing about the laws, and it may tie in, but you say that many believe President Trump should follow President Nixon's lead.
Yeah.
And close the border, and I want to know should he and why.
Yeah.
But I'm also interested on laws on the books already.
Yeah.
Does the amnesty say that once you're here and you declare amnesty that they've got to check you out and they'll let them go, and of course none of them show back up overnight?
Yeah, well, that's what they're claiming. But if you look back 20 plus years ago when we actually enforced our laws a little bit better than we do now, in this regard at least, the country, if you're fleeing political persecution, which is what political asylum is, you're fearing that the government of Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, or Mexico, the government is going to kill you. You're fleeing because you think that your government is going to kill you, which we have laws on the books. The UN has laws on the books for this, and how this is supposed to take place, as you and I have discussed on this program a number of times. The first country you go to, that's the country you apply for your asylum at. So if you're coming from Guatemala, you're coming from El Salvador, and you're coming from Honduras, and the first country you go to is Mexico, that's where you get to apply for your asylum. Yet they're just balking. Yeah.
President Almo in Mexico said, we're offering them, you've got it, you can stay here, and they don't want to stay.
Yeah.
What are you offering us for free,
Well, and I
don't know.
I think that when you look at that, I think that, Mexico, I mean, it's a double-edged sword for them. I think the new president's walking a little bit of a tightrope, but if they are in fact offering this asylum for these people, then let's just think back to when we were 3 or 4 years ago when they had the Iraqi Christians that were in San Diego, and they'd been in this country for a couple of years. They weren't on social, any kind of welfare. They're being taken care of by other Iraqis that lived in the community. And the thing was that they couldn't fly here directly from Germany or Italy, the other countries that they came. They went to Mexico and crossed the border through Mexico. They pled. They were Christians. They knew that if they got deported back to Iraq, that they would for sure meet a certain death. And we know what, the Middle East and the, what ISIS was capable of absolutely murdering Christians. However, because they went to Germany and Italy first, when their number came up in the courts and they actually showed up for the court dates like you're supposed to, they're like that 1 or 2% that actually show up, they actually got deported back to Europe, because that is the way the rules work for political asylum. So I think that what Americans need to start asking their lawmakers is like, well, here's an example, and it's a recent example. Why are we having to take all of these people into our country, take care of them?
What president that was under?
Oh, yeah, that was under, yes, President Obama. Yeah, so, you see that we do have laws and there is order, but for some reason, the lawmakers, primarily in the left, but a lot of Republicans have the same party line. Just let them come in, we can take care of them. But states like California, New York, and other high-tax states, they simply can't afford the influx for this long. I mean, it's a matter of time, because again, when you look at the money going into the coffers, they're not putting in that money. They're paying into it, but they're taking more out of it. Because if you look at what it costs to educate a child, they have children, they often have 1, 2, or 3 children, or 4. That it comes at a cost. And typically in California, it's roughly $8,000 to $10,000 per child to educate per year. So do we think people coming in this country are paying $40,000 in taxes every year to cover that? So, I mean, it just gets to be cost. We can't take the burden anymore.
About 3 minutes, Kimberly, before I have to take my break. And let me bring in the dirty word here. Actually, it's only 3 letters, MSM, but tell me a little bit about this revisionist history that the MSM mainstream media is using now to prevent Trump from shutting down the ports of entry.
Yeah.
About that.
Well, this last week, I kind of decided I was going to write on what President Nixon had done when he was president and how he closed the border down, since President Trump has said that he's going to be cutting the funds and cutting aid off to these countries. And that over the weekend, he said he's seriously considering shutting down the border. And everybody's crying foul. It'll be an economic disaster. And the president doesn't have a right to do it. He doesn't, need to do something like that. So I went back and I started to try to find information on what Nixon did and what he went through at the time. And when you go through the Google searches and the Yahoo and all the different searches, you can find nothing that there was anything positive that came out of Operation, what do we have? It's Operation Intercept is what Nixon started. I couldn't find anything. I found the New York Times like 2 years ago had rewritten history on this. So after doing my research, I decided, I'm going to go to the Nixon Library and I'm going to go to their reference section and I'm going to find out if they have a different story as to what happened. And of course, they had a much different, coverage of the media and what they had. I mean, it was a split decision where people thought that they, agreed with Nixon and the other half did not agree with Nixon. However, what they found after they did this, and we've talked about this, I know, on the show as well. So the listeners are probably getting a review here. But what they found was that they didn't collect as much marijuana, which is really what they targeted, and heroin and such across the ports of entry. So if the media is looking at Nixon's thing, and right now they're all condemning it, it's bad. And I mean, look, they're not collecting the drugs through their ports of entry, then it's really actually a really good argument for the wall. If the drugs weren't coming through the ports of entry, then they were coming in somewhere. And that meant that maybe we need a wall. So when you take a look at some of Nixon's activities and what he did before he was, ushered out of Washington, D.C., he actually, he made, was able to, get some very, start a positive discussion regarding drugs and what countries they're really coming from and what we could do about it.
All right, now then, coming up on our break, let me give you a heads up here. My Wi-Fi is real slow today, but I did go to my favorite search engine, DuckDuckGo.com, and they do have Operation Intercept. They're the ones that don't hide a lot of this stuff, and talks about even what time it started, 2:30 Sunday, September 21st, 1969. Wow. Well, you can't go wrong when you've got Kimberly Dvorak, Chuck Wilder, and DuckDuckGo. Chuck Wilder with Kimberly Dvorak, Senior Foreign Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. And, of course, you can get her on Facebook, follow out everything that's going on. Couple of important questions. Number one is what kind of taxes are Americans paying with all this crazy stuff going on? And the other one that I want to try to get in before we have to leave and not much time is there's sort of like no collusion going on because Trump does have a legal right to act on the border crisis.
He does. He has an absolute right to act on the border crisis and law mandates. If he decides he wants one person not to come in the country, he can do it. He can do it. I mean, will the media paint him as a racist, xenophobic person? 100%. But the president has absolute control over national security. And our borders are national security. Because if one of those people comes through the southern border and commits a terrorist act or murders, I mean, they're killing U.S. citizens as well. That's something that the president has absolute control over. Again, it may not look pretty for people who are in the media because they live inside the beltway here and they live in the lap of luxury compared to the majority of the country. And so they don't understand the issue that most Americans in flyover country actually face on a daily basis. But the president can do this. I just don't know why his advisors aren't pushing a little bit harder. And maybe now that the Mueller reports come out, that he's feeling it a little bit more of his oats and saying, look, I'm actually going to enforce the law. I'm actually going to shut the border down. I'm going to show these people that they need us more than we need them. And that would be true. And I'm going to read this thing that Nixon had said and why he shut the border down. He said that for diplomatic reasons, the true purpose of the exercise was never revealed. Operation Intercept was a massive economic and social disruption. It could not be sustained forever in the United States, but it could outlast Mexico. It was an exercise in international extortion, pure and simple and effective, designed to bend Mexico to our will. If that doesn't sound like Donald Trump, I don't know what does, because that sounds like something he would do. So it sounds like he may have been reading up on this, and that's something that came out of the Nixon administration. And by making a point, he's going to show, look, you guys need the money more than we do. We'll sustain, even though we're $22 trillion in debt, we will be able to sustain this. But he is going to use this to his benefit on that. And like I said, for Americans who don't have savings accounts and can't get through next month if they don't work, they have got to be upset hearing that people are coming to this country illegally and they just spent $8,000 at least to get here.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we've got a minute left for the listeners. I'm going to tell you, so much hypocrisy going on here, so much politics. Because, for example, when President Trump started, getting all the flack about, who could come into the country and who couldn't come into the country, and oh my goodness, racist. Obama, the same countries, the same 8 countries, and no problem. It's just when you want to get the judges that hate Trump because Hillary lost. Yeah,
pure and simple. And we don't have an educated enough population to actually know what's really going on. And you're not seeing this on the media. And the right has to do a much better job at getting their message across or they could lose 2020, and they could lose it on this issue. Yeah.
Be nice, right? Bring a knife, as Holder would say. All right. Hey, Kimberly, thank you very much. Look forward to our next report. It'll be next week. All right.
All righty. Thanks.
All right. Kimberly Dvorak. Can you spell that last name?
D.
D-V-O-R-A-K.